Hi friends. Today we're going to be talking about coyotes and cattle ranching. Both of those things can be in the desert. We've been talking about the desert this week. So coyote is a member of the dog family. We often think of it as sort of along with the wolves, but coyotes are a lot smaller than wolves. Their sound is different. We see coyotes more often than we used to, even around these areas, because coyotes live in the wild, but they also can live in the desert as well. Coyotes eat all kinds of things. They eat small animals. They can even eat fruits and plants, so they adapt well to whatever environment that they're in. I've got a great video set up for you to watch after you finish this video. To learn a little bit more about coyotes, and you can see what they look like. You can hear a little bit more about them. Now, cattle ranching can even happen in the desert as well. Cattle can eat the scrub branches and little grasses, that are in the desert. Now, the ranchers move them from place to place, just like they do in other places that are not quite as wilderness or as desert oriented. And the cows do fine. They turn the wells on and off so the cows will have enough water to drink. And most ranchers check their cattle very frequently to make sure that they're okay. So cattle ranching in the desert is really a thing. So our story today is called The Song of the West. And it tells a little bit more about the family that we learned about with the wonderful camp and Mr. Mark and Miss Allison. So this story's a fun one. It's called The Song of the West. Mr. Mark watched as the horsemanship campers rode across the desert sand. On this overnight ride, the campers would learn about horses and some of the jobs that horses are used for. Several experienced wranglers rode among the campers. These men would be teaching the campers about working with cattle and making sure they stayed safe. Mr. Mark rode behind the line of campers and wranglers. Although it made his ride a dusty one, being at the back of the line allowed him to keep watch over the campers and make sure they were safe. His dog, Beak, trotted along beside him. Soon one of the wranglers spotted some cattle. The campers were excited to be able to put what they had learned into practice. Beak ran ahead and began barking and running around the cattle, helping to round up the strays. One of the wranglers got a fire started and began heating up the branding iron. The wranglers helped the campers brand the calves, and then they let the calves go. By the time the branding was finished, everyone was dusty and worn out. Mr. Mark brought out the food and supervised the campers cooking it over the fire. Although Beak enjoyed the smell of the food, he had been trained not to beg. Mr. Mark sat down with a plate of food and called Beak over. He had brought Beak's food along on the trail ride. After a good hot meal, everyone bedded down in sleeping bags under the stars. Mr. Mark enjoyed looking up into the bright desert sky. It always reminded him and amazed him about what a wonderful God he served and how many more stars he could see when he was in the desert. The night was dark and cold. Then Mr. Mark heard howling, sometimes known as the Song of the West. The coyotes' howls alerted Mr. Mark to the fact that coyotes were near. Mr. Mark jumped up. He and Beak started walking around the sleeping area, keeping careful watch over the campers. The coyotes' howls became softer, and after a while, Mr. Mark crawled back into his sleeping bag. His faithful dog took a watchful place beside him. It wasn't unusual to hear coyotes howling at night to camp. Although most coyotes go out of their way to avoid humans, Mr. Mark was alert just in case. He and Beak would often get up in the night to check on things when they heard the howling. It had been a good trail drive. The new calves were branded. The campers were closer to their goal of being expert horsemen. So that was a good story about Mr. Mark and Beak. Another fun thing that the campers are doing, learning about cattle, learning about horsemanship, and all learning about it in the desert. So I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you enjoy the videos that I have prepared for you now to watch, learning a little bit more about coyotes and the desert. Have a blessed day.